Hello my bookish friends, welcome or welcome back if it's your first time here. I'm Elizabeth and this is Reading Riley, where we like to read Riley, not take ourselves too seriously, and have some fun with books. Today we're going to be talking about, listen, I've cultivated a list just for you of dark thrillers that are written from multiple timelines and all by female authors. Very specific. It just happened. It just worked out that way. I don't know, but I think you're gonna like these. Before we get into the books, if you like thrillers, lists of books, recommendations, talking about books in general, I would encourage you to hit that subscribe button and the bell notification if you want to catch my future videos. I do post at least once a week. Without further ado, let's get into the books. So I'm going to give you my top 5, not necessarily in that order, but just top 5 generally speaking. All right, the first book that I want to talk about today is Behind Closed Doors by B.A. Paris. I believe this was her debut, and this was released in 2016. On Goodreads, this has a 3.96. I gave this 4 stars, but I do look back on this so fondly, and it's probably at least a 4.5 for me at this point, just because of the way it sat with me. This is a domestic suspense thriller, psychological, absolutely psychological. And our 2 timelines here are simply past and present. We're following this couple, Grace and Jack. They are newlyweds. I would say, to set the scene for you, imagine a really bloody crime scene and you walk in and everything's just dripping with blood, but at the same time you've got an old scratchy record player playing Frank Sinatra. Neither of those things are in the story, but for me, when you have this like really classic fun song and it's so juxtaposed to what's happening in the scene, that's one of the scariest things, and I get that kind of vibe from this story. They don't know each other for very long before they kind of jump into this marriage. Grace, she cares for her younger sister who has Down syndrome, and she just dotes on her. She loves her so much. One day, they're in a park somewhere, and Millie is her younger sister. She's like 17. Millie is in a situation where she's dancing, but nobody else wants to, and she starts feeling like an outsider and upset, and Grace doesn't know what to do. And then Jack comes out of the woodworks and saves the day for Millie, enters at the perfect time, and Grace thinks, oh my God, what a wonderful guy. He's looking out for my sister. Like, there's nothing I care about more than my sister, and this guy is saving her from embarrassment by asking her to dance, and it's just this like beautiful meet cute. Jack is wealthy, he's handsome, he's this attorney, and he defends battered women for a living. Like, hi, good guy, right? So they have this romance. Jack sweeps Grace off her feet, they get married, and so we're telling the story between now, after they're newlywed, living together, and preparing for Millie to come to live with them. And then we also go back and hear the story about all of the details leading up to this point. The story is told through Grace's perspective, first-person perspective, and it's just great. It's so wonderfully told. The twist is amazing. The ending is so satisfying. Shit hits the fan, obviously. Things don't go as expected. I highly recommend this. Can't wait to read her new book called The Therapist that just came out. Let's read the first line. We have present. The champagne bottle knocks against the marble kitchen counter, making me jump. Not a bad first line. Not bad. Not great, but not bad. Next, I want to talk about Dark Places by Gillian Flynn. She gets a lot of attention for Gone Girl and even Sharp Objects, but not necessarily for this book, which was her second release, came out in 2009. It has a 3.93 on Goodreads, and I gave this 5 stars. I absolutely love this story. It is also a dual timeline, and we are going between present day and 1985. In 1985, on January 3rd, Libby Day was the sole survivor in an attack on her family where her 2 sisters and her mother were brutally murdered in Kinnicky, Kansas. This would become a huge sensation and was known thereafter as the Satan sacrifice of Kinnicky, Kansas. Libby was 7 years old at the time, and she went on to testify against her brother for having been the one who murdered the rest of their family. He was then convicted and is now in jail. Moving forward, in the present day, Libby is 32 years old. She lives by herself. She's disconnected from reality. She has been living off of donated money from the concerned public. She's never had a job. She's drifting. She is very cynical and angry at the world and about life in general. When you start this story, I hated Libby. I didn't have empathy for her, but then her life kind of changes. She's running out of money, and there are other people that have been through tragedies since she was 7 years old, and she's not getting the attention she used to get and not getting the money she used to get. She's approached by this group called the Kill Club, and they are a society of true crime obsessed people. In this group, there are several people who believe that her brother was in fact innocent of this crime, and so they pay her in order to be able to interview her. She comes up with this scheme in her mind where she thinks she's going to keep getting money from them under the guise of investigating whether or not her brother was actually innocent or not. In her mind, there's no way he was innocent, but she wants to take advantage of this situation, avoid having to get a job by leaning into their assumptions about what happened in her family. She goes on this journey of quote unquote investigating her own family's murder, and along the way she ends up on the run again from a killer. She also has this amazing character arc. By the end of the story, I ended up loving Libby. We're focusing on the satanic panic of the 80s and 90s. We're delving into some really dark things here. Dark Places is it's not used loosely, it's real. All of these books are really dark, so be warned. And I just can't say enough about Gillian Flynn's writing. I just love her style. I think it's beautifully written, thoughtful, the twists are great. She has you until the very end, just clutched on the edge of your seat. Let's read the first line and see how this starts. Libby Day now. I have a meanness inside me, real as an organ. I like it. The next book I want to talk about is not necessarily a thriller per se, but it does have the dual perspective, and I would call it more of like a literary suspense. And that is My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. This book is so dark and so gorgeous at the same time. It's a work of art. This book is a work of art. And if you can handle the content of this, I would highly recommend you pick this up. If you're into thrillers, it gives you that kind of vibe, that darkness, that suspense that I like in thrillers. So I think this would carry over to your taste as well. This came out in March of 2020, right at the beginning of the pandemic. It has a 4.05 on Goodreads. I gave this 5 stars. I absolutely loved this. It's uncomfortable. It's an uncomfortable read. I'm not going to lie. Keep that in mind as you go through it. But we're following Vanessa. We have 2 timelines, in 2000 and then again in 2017, 17 years later. In 2000, Vanessa is 15. She becomes entangled with one of her teachers, Jacob, who is 40-something at the time. Kate Elizabeth Russell shows you the grooming that is happening. And this has been compared to Lolita. Lolita is referenced in this book multiple times because he asks her to read it as he's grooming her for this position. We jump to 2017. In 2017, Vanessa is still, she's stagnant in life. Life hasn't turned out the way she's expected it to, but she's still under the belief that her relationship with Jacob Strain was real and it was love. That was her first love. She won't let that go. But what happens then is that another student from her past accuses Jacob of sexual abuse. They contact Vanessa and ask her if she's willing to speak out about this. And Vanessa has to confront this conflict that maybe what happened to her in her past was not love. In fact, maybe it was abuse. In the present day, she still has a relationship with him. This whole story is about her coming to terms with what happened, her taking the power back. It's just so beautifully written. I don't know how to describe to you how wonderfully written this is, because I know the content is shocking, but I just have to highly encourage you to read it. Kate Elizabeth Russell started writing this. She took 10 years to write this, and when she started, she was around the age of Vanessa in the past timeline, and when she finished it, she was around the age of Vanessa in the current timeline. So the way she puts her thoughts out on the page relate so much to this character. It's just so powerful. So I highly recommend this. Let's look at the first line. 2017. I get ready for work and the post has been up for 8 hours. Not the best first line, but highly encourage you to read this book if you can handle the content. Again, trigger warnings for literally everything I'm talking about today, so keep that in mind. Okay, the next book I want to talk about is one that I've recently read and really enjoyed. This is also a dual timeline, but it also has multiple points of view. That is Local Woman Missing by Mary Kubica. This came out just in May of 2021. It's got a 4.12 on Goodreads. I gave this 4 stars. We're following 2 different timelines. You have 11 years ago and you have today. The way the story starts out is a woman named Shelby Tebow. Shelby Tebow disappears. She's the first to go missing. Following that, we have a woman named Meredith and her daughter Delilah, who also go missing around the same time and place. This was all 11 years ago. They're never heard from again. In the current time, we're following Meredith's husband and son, and also some of his neighbors, Kate and B, who are partners and live nearby. They sometimes helped with the kids. They knew Meredith, they knew Delilah. Also in current day, suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere, Delilah shows back up. She is almost feral. She has been through so much. She was very young when she went missing, and now she's a teenager. And I can't tell you much more about it, but Delilah gets reintegrated into her family home. Things start seeming a little bit off. We start trying to get information from her about what happened to her mother and seeing how that could potentially be connected to the first disappearance of Shelby. And it's super twisty. It's very fast paced. I think it's a really great story by Mary Kubica, and it's my first read from her, so I'm definitely going to be looking out for this author and maybe checking out some of her backlist in the future. But let's go ahead and look at the first line. It starts with a prologue, and this is 11 years before. There's a smudge of lipstick on the collar of his shirt. And that's it. I love this cover. I love the pink. I love the trees, the forest. It's really cool. The next book I have to share with you guys today is The Chalk Man by C.J. Tudor. This book came out in 2018. It has a 3.73 on Goodreads. I gave this a 4-star rating. And this is the essence, the epitome, the solid definition of a dual timeline thriller. C.J. Tudor's writing is like the Diane Sawyer of journalism. It is elegant. It is paced just right. Iconic. I respect her so much as an author after reading this. This was my first C.J. Tudor. But this story itself, it's very reminiscent of it in that it follows a group of friends in 1986. The whole riding your bikes, having your little friend gang, just hanging out in the streets in the summertime. It's set in a sleepy English village. We're following our main protagonist, Eddie, who was 12 years old in 1986. During this summer, really messed up shit happens to Eddie and his friends. They go through a lot of trauma. Eventually, these kids end up making a code, kind of like a friend code, out of these chalk figures. Each one of them has a different color that represents them, so if they wake up in the morning and they see that color written on the sidewalk outside their house, they know who it's from and they know which direction it's telling them to go in, to find them, to meet up, to do whatever. The chalkmen are eventually what lead them to find this body. Then we cut forward to 30 years later, in 2016. Eddie is now 42 years old. He's a teacher. He's still living in his childhood home, just kind of existing. You know, he's not living his best life, but he's existing. He's doing all right. You know, he thinks he's gotten through this trauma of his childhood, but then one day he gets a letter. He opens it up and it's a picture of a chalk man. He then comes to find out that his friends in his friend group have also received this picture. And at first he thinks this must be some kind of prank, but then one of his friends ends up dead. He begins this journey to try to understand what's happening, figure out if he is being threatened. You don't know if there's something paranormal happening or not. It's just this really eerie, steady pacing, and you don't know who you can trust. Every single character in this story is important.
Do not trust any of them.
I love the way C.J. Tudor writes the distinction between his childhood voice and his adult voice. It's a real talent when you can write through the perspective of a child and do it believably, but also in a way that gives you insight into their perspective as a child. And you really do see the things that he notices and what he remembers from when he was a child. Things you don't necessarily pick up on as a child, but adults might, but you just kind of see it in your child glasses, you know? And then as an adult, when he's recalling these memories and he's seeing what that probably actually was versus what he saw in his own mind. And every seemingly innocent aside that these characters make is so wonderfully woven into the plot. Everything is important. Everything is important, so you have to pay attention, but it's so worth it. The end is very satisfying, and I thought it was just a really great read. And I don't have the book, so I don't have the first sentence. But I highly encourage you to read this, and that is my top 5 dual timeline dark thrillers written by women. These ones I've read, but I also want to share with you a few that I haven't yet read that are on my TBR that also fit into this very specific type of theme that we're talking about today. I have 2 that are new releases that just aren't even out yet, and I have 1 that I just haven't read yet that I want to. And the first of that is Pretty Little Wife by Darby Kane. This came out in 2018. Is that right? Nope, December of 2020. What is wrong with me? This is a 3.97 on Goodreads. My rating is to be determined. This is a domestic suspense. I'm just gonna read you the synopsis. So we're following Lila Ridgefield. She lives in an idyllic college town, but not everything is what it seems. Lila isn't what she seems. A student vanished months ago, and now Lila's husband, Aaron, is also missing. At first, these cases are treated as horrible coincidences until it's discovered that the student is really the third of 3 unexplained disappearances over the last few years, and the police are desperate to find the connection, if there even is one. Little do they know that they might be stumbling over only part of the truth. With the small town in an uproar, everyone is worried about the whereabouts of the beloved high school teacher. Everyone except his wife. So when her husband Aaron goes missing, everyone's worried about him, but she's not. Lila is more confused because she was the last person to see her husband's body, and now it's gone. She's involved some way in her husband's disappearance, from what I'm gathering from the synopsis. As far as the dual timelines go, I think it's actually more than 2, but we're taking this main inciting incident of her husband's death, and then we're going weeks before, weeks after. We're going to tell you about the story of her husband's death, and so you're just kind of telling this story all around this inciting incident in order to get to the truth of what actually happened to her husband and what happened to these other 3 women who have gone missing. So this one sounds really good to me. Let's go ahead and read the first sentence. Chapter 1, A Monster. She missed the signs before. Oh, shit. That's a good first line. The next one I want to talk to you about that I'm very excited for is released on August 19th of this year. I happened to get my copy of it from Book of the Month, so I have it here, and that is 56 Days by Catherine Ryan Howard. So excited to have this early release. I love that Book of the Month does that. So on Goodreads, so far it has a 3.94. That's out of about 1,500 ratings. My rating is to be determined, yet again. We're following this couple Sierra and Oliver, and they meet in the supermarket line in Dublin and start dating the same week COVID-19 reaches the Irish shores. And that was 56 days ago. 35 days ago, when lockdown threatens to keep them apart, Oliver suggests that they move in together. Sierra sees a unique opportunity for a relationship to flourish without the scrutiny of family and friends. Oliver sees a chance to hide who and what he really is. Interesting. Today, detectives arrive at Oliver's apartment to find there is a decomposing body inside. We don't know who it is. They have to figure out what happened. Has lockdown created an opportunity for someone to commit the perfect crime? So this one sounds really interesting to me. Again, it's not dual. I mean, I guess it is dual timeline. Does dual mean two, or does it mean just multiple? I have to look that up. But listen, we're following 3 different timelines, and we're going back and forth between all of these to figure out what the hell happened between these 2 people. It sounds amazing. I was so excited that Book of the Month had this as one of their picks, and I cannot wait to get to it. So let's read the first line and see how it sounds. And this is in the timeline of today. It's like one of those viral videos taken inside some swanky apartment complex, where all the slim and fit 30-something residents are doing jumping jacks behind the glass railings of their balconies while the world burns. Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good. The last one I want to talk about today that is on my TBR, I don't have a physical copy of this yet either. It is released on August 1st, and it's the first of a duology. It's called A Familiar Sight by Brianna. I can't even read my own writing. I gotta, oh geez. Brianna Labuskes.
Labuskes.
It's called Dr. Gretchen White #1. As of right now, it's got 1,565 ratings, and it's got a 4.25 stars on Goodreads. My mom told me about this book. She said, look, I got it early on Amazon Prime or whatever, and you gotta read this book. It was so good. It has this dual timeline, and they meet up, and I said, dual timeline. Okay, I'm gonna add this to my list. Psychologist and criminologist Dr. Gretchen White is a specialist in antisocial personality disorders. So interesting. And violent crimes. She's helped solve enough prominent cases for Detective Patrick Shaughnessy that her own history is often overlooked. So she's got a dark past. Gretchen is an admitted sociopath, once suspected of killing her aunt. Oh, snap. Shaughnessy still thinks Gretchen got away with a murder. It's not going to happen again. When a high-profile new case lands on Shaughnessy's desk, it seems open and shut. Remorseless teenager Viola Kent is accused of killing her mother. Amid stories of childhood horrors and Viola's cruel manipulations, the bad seed has already been found guilty by a rapt public. But Gretchen might be seeing something in Viola that nobody else sees because she has this unique perspective of being a sociopath herself. If Viola is a scapegoat, then who did it? And what are they hiding? To find the truth, Gretchen must enter a void that is not only dark and cold-blooded, but also frighteningly familiar. So I think we're going to get details of her past and her story, about how she supposedly killed her aunt, whether she did or did not do that. And she's going to use that to give insight into this current case. And I love the talk of sociopaths, psychopaths, criminology, psychology, and the mixture of all that just sounds amazing to me. And I can't wait for this to come out. I am super stoked about it. And that is yet another dual timeline dark thriller written by a female person. I hope you enjoyed this video because I definitely enjoyed making it. I definitely have some more things in the works that are similar in nature as far as like kind of specific lists of things that you might be interested in, because I'm interested in, and hopefully other people are too. I don't know, but this is fun for me. As always, I will have all of these books listed down below, as well as my social media if you're interested in connecting in other ways. It's Reading Riley on every platform. Super easy. That's all I have today. I thank you so much if you are still with me. I appreciate you so much. That's gonna be it. Don't forget that life is short, so read Riley. Cheers and goodbye.